Hi, everyone. Stephen Vantassel, wildlife control consultant, bringing another episode of Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek podcast system. Thanks for coming along and listening to us. Definitely would welcome some feedback if you have it at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. We don't have a particular sponsor for this episode, but if you want to be a sponsor, definitely reach out to me at the email that I've already talked about. We'd love to have you on board to market your product to our audience. Those of you with ideas for future shows, definitely reach out to me. Love to hear from you. And yes, the criticisms as well. Definitely bring those along. So I want to get straight away. We have a guest today, Blair Calder, president of the Automatic Trap Company. He is the distributor for US and Canada, and his website is automatictrap.com. Welcome aboard, Mr. Calder.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then about your company, and about the products that you sell.
Sure. So I own a distribution company that handles several different products, and has several different companies that specialize in unique or hazardous items, basically hard to acquire or very unusual type of things. And a few years ago, I discovered the GoodNature automatic rat and mouse trap, the A24, when I was looking for my own trap, for my own problems that I was having with rats. Yeah, I can tell. It's kind of, well, it's a funny story, but just that's my background. Is I'm a lifetime entrepreneur. I've always started and run companies, and when I saw this, I just knew it had to come to the U.S., and I knew I had to start a company to distribute it. So that's why I'm here. That's how we got here.
It's a cool trap. So I'd love to drill down into the A24 because it's from New Zealand, I believe, right?
Yes, that's right. It was invented about 15 years ago.
Okay.
As part of essentially a competition. So DOC, or the Department of Conservation in New Zealand, was looking for a way to more effectively control rat and stoat populations. And if we don't have stoats here, but they're kind of like a weasel,
right,
or ferrets maybe, and they're the cutest looking animals.
Oh, they are.
You ever saw, but they're incredibly destructive. And New Zealand, some people don't know that New Zealand has no native mammals at all. So the islands, or all of both islands, the north and south part, no mammals whatsoever. So the birds flourished. They were everywhere, so loud you could hear them for miles offshore. But then the rats and the stoats and all different kinds of rabbits had been introduced for one reason or another, or by accident,
right.
And they completely destroyed the population of birds, because the birds have no adaptation for mammals, so they're not afraid of them. They don't run from them. They don't hide from them.
Yeah, so they have a big problem with invasives. So talk a little bit more about the A24, what makes it unusual. Do you have a sample one there to pull up?
I got a couple right here on my desk.
Let's show it to our audience. They may not be familiar with it, and describe it for us.
Sure. So it looks like this. I'll set it out in the background.
That looks good.
So this is how, when it's mounted, it mounts like this, and it uses you clip this mount. You screw the mount in to a tree post, or a 2x4, or a wall, and then it snaps into this mount, and then this is how the device would sit and operate. There's other ways to mount it. I can talk about those in a second, but I have a cutaway of it, which is my favorite demonstrator, because this really helps.
Yeah.
So then what happens is at the top, there is a compartment right here that you unscrew, and then inside here is a lure dispensing device. So, but it's lure, it's not bait. They never really get to it. They'll eat some, but for the most part, it's just about attracting them up this part of the trap.
Yep.
And when they get to the top of the trap, there's a small trigger, which you can barely see on the camera, but it's right here. They touch it, and this compressed gas CO2 cartridge powers a pneumatic hammer that will slide across. Well, it rips across, and then it smashes them right in exactly the right spot on the skull, and it will kill a rat or a stoat instantly. And it completely, it kills a mouse. If you could be more than dead, they're more than dead, because it ends up hitting the mouse at the sort of base of the skull, and about a quarter of the mouse's body is exposed to the hammer, and it just totally flattens it, and it's dead instantly. I mean, you can see them drop out of the trap dead before they hit the ground.
Yeah, it's like a captive bolt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Captive bolt stunner, exactly. The only difference is that it resets. So
Mhm.
after plunging, crushing the skull instantly, and then killing the rat or the mouse or the stoat or whatever rodent was in there, and then it resets automatically. It's spring loaded, it resets, and then this cartridge will refill
Right.
with more CO2 and ready for the next shot. It only takes about 4 seconds to reload, and then it's ready to go. And so you'll get sometimes if you have an infestation, or if you have you know, really hungry rodents, you can catch 5, 10 in a night. I mean, there's no limit other than how many you get out of the cartridge, which is 24. That's where
Right.
it got its name, A24.
No, and I had a chance to, when I saw it, I just thought it was a really cool device, and I had a chance to play with it here in Montana, and so I was able to show I could use it on ground squirrels. And so the only difference was is I laid it down on the ground, which I know is not what your recommended practices are. It just seemed that I couldn't get the squirrels to stand and and stand up into it
Sure.
the way you're supposed to. But I was able to use it on ground squirrels, and I also in the grain bin was able to take out a deer mouse with it.
Okay.
So yeah, it definitely works. It's cool. Uh, so anything else? I mean, is
Well,
there?
sure. So in addition to, so you can mount it in the wall, which is what we've already talked about,
Mhm.
but we're just coming out, I mean, literally in the next 3 days,
All right.
we're launching this. This might, in North America anyway, might be the first time seen on air. This is going to be, this is a box that the trap will be contained in. And it
Like a bait
functions
station. Mhm.
much like a bait station. So the trap is in there. And the advantage, of course, is that you hide the trap itself, because we don't want people fussing with them or getting
Right.
hurt by
Right.
putting their hand up in it. But more importantly, we want to hide the dead rat or dead mouse.
Okay.
And this box will allow PCOs or PMPs to set up these stations in situations where they're not allowed, or the customers not willing to use pesticides,
Mhm.
like rodenticides, and or areas where you want to be able to conceal the effect of it. That is the dead rat. So you can fit 3 dead rats in there, or maybe 10 dead mice. And if you check it frequently, you can stay on top of it without using a regular bait station.
Sure. No, I think it's a great idea. For me, it's more of I didn't even think about concealing the dead body. I was thinking more in terms of the safety issue,
Mm.
because if a kid sticks his finger up there, it's going to leave a mark.
Oh yeah, yeah. You could definitely hurt yourself. You could be hurt by putting your hand up in there. It's less dangerous than a typical rodent snap trap, though. So,
Oh,
you
interesting.
know,
Okay.
well, if you think about it, right, like you've got a regular snap trap.
Hmm.
I'm not talking about the little wee ones for the mice, the
Right.
nice big one, right? I mean, you could see that easily breaking a finger. This could do that too, but you're not going to get your foot in it, whereas you can get your foot in a snap trap.
Okay.
We have over 50,000 of these in the field in the United States now, and
Wow.
we've received zero calls or complaints about, well, first of all, well, pets, for example,
Hmm.
stepping on so a dog or cat can step on a snap trap and it can get hit with it
Right.
and really hurt, and that is not going to happen with this.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit more about the bait. One of the things that I was trying the bait out, or your lure, I guess is the better
Sure.
word. And I was wondering if it was going to work on our ground squirrel. I was testing it on Richardson ground squirrel here in Montana, and unfortunately, I couldn't get him attracted to it. So when I converted over to peanut butter, I was able to get some action that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Has there been any talk about changing that bait structure over and just simply eliminating that? Because I haven't found, not that I've done a scientific survey, but the people I've spoken with have not had good success with that lure. It seems to be almost like a regional thing.
Yeah, so the rats, as you know, as everyone who's in this business well knows, are neophobic. They don't like new things. They get really acclimatized to the food that they're eating. the reason why this lure is good, even though it's not, frankly, as good as 1 hour old peanut butter, which in my opinion is the best lure there is.
Okay.
1 hour old peanut butter, that's it.
All right.
But 1 day old peanut butter, I don't know. 1 3 day old peanut butter, you know, the effectiveness of it really drops off quickly. Whereas, it might have more punch initially, but this lure will last for 6 months. So with the automatic lure dispenser or the automatic lure pump, I'm going to pull it out so you see it. It comes in this this flexible pouch.
Okay.
It's called the ALP, or the automatic lure pump, and it's activated and has a tiny fuel cell in there. It gets activated when you comes time to use it. You take the activation piece out, and then it will begin to generate an ever so slight pressure inside this flexible bag that holds the lure, which will then slowly eject it out over a 6-month period of time. The lure itself then stays fresh. So like I said, not as good as 1 hour old peanut butter.
Yeah.
So you're going to get better results in 1 night with peanut butter than you would with the lure.
Yeah, I didn't have my version didn't have that pump version, so it was just the container. So this is when did that change get developed? When did that come out in the market?
So they've been experimenting with it for a while, but we converted completely over to it at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, so that was it was well after my use. Well, that's good news. So has there been any conversation though about getting some more options on the lure in terms of different?
Yeah, it's a constant conversation about the lure. It might set you. It might make you. It might surprise you to know that there are people that are spending all day, every day on this very problem in New Zealand, fabricating new lures and trying new lures out. And the challenge is that trapping is not. There is no single lure that's going to attract every rat every time.
No. We definitely understand that, but I'm just saying we have in the U.S. we have master bait makers here who have years of experience with various animals, and that's not taking anything away from New Zealand. There's no doubt New Zealand's been fighting invasives for a very long time. But in terms of, we could speed this process along by giving people more options, by reaching out to some of the U.S. bait makers and trying some of their products. So it's really just inserting it into the bait container.
Right. Yeah. You are right. It's definitely worth considering. But maybe something to draw your attention to is this, which is the DIY lure cup.
Okay.
And so we provide this in our older kits that came with it. Now you can order them. They're inexpensive in numbers. Shipping is a drag, but you can buy 10 of them. And basically you can put whatever you want in here. So if you're going to use peanut butter, you would put it in here, and then it mounts in the top of the trap, just like the ALP does. And then you put the shroud cap over it to protect it so that can't get at it. So let's say, you were trying to, capture a rat that had developed a flavor for dog food or chicken feed. So we've had people do this chicken feed all the time. We would get a call from someone who had a chicken coop, and they would say, oh, put them out, didn't get anything, haven't gotten anything. And so, okay, well, listen, first thing you got to do is you got to clean that chicken coop up, right? Like you got it like surgical clean. Get all the grain up that's lying around the chicken aren't eating and stuff like that, because quite often the chicken are quite fat. They have lots of food around. They're messy, and so you got to get all that cleaned up. Then you can take the same chicken feed, put it in here. You can mix it with some oil. Forgotten what the name is. Lard. You can put it in there, make your own mixture, and then boom. If you're feeding the rats what they know. The other thing is pre-feeding. Super important. With the lure that we provide, we highly recommend pre-feeding as much as possible. So go around to the site, put dabs of that lure everywhere so that the rats discover it, they get acclimatized to it. They try a little, they go away, they like it, they don't get sick, they come back, they have more, right? Then when they encounter the trap, they're like, yeah, I know what that is. I'm gonna get me some of it. So up they go. Height is super important. Make sure you mount it at the right height, because rats don't like to extend their torso too much. They get uneasy, which is actually the same problem you're having with your ground squirrels.
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah. So I just laid it on its side, and it's kind of
Right.
how I did it. Or I had a stake. I used a stake and kept it so that it was just only a few inches off the ground at an angle, and they would just, it worked. It worked fine for the limited amount of time I did. It was not a scientific study. It was just a,
Sure.
I wanted to just do a proof, what I call a proof of concept. And so I mean, I liked it because it had that repeat action with it. You didn't have to worry about whether you had an animal in a trap or not. So it was much more.
Yeah.
And we're in a state in Montana where we don't have a lot of the restrictions. I mean, I feel bad for places like Massachusetts and probably Washington.
Sure.
My suspicion is those states, because of the brilliance of their citizens, and I'm being sarcastic here, have banned a lot of stuff, right? So and this is one trap I believe they would have banned. It wasn't even invented yet, and they banned it.
Right.
So because they're so brilliant.
Well, it's the way you're using it. Indoors, you're safe pretty much.
Well, the law
I mean,
doesn't.
anything indoors, you're
The
fine.
laws wouldn't make a distinction, right? That's the problem. The law
Right.
doesn't say if you're using the trap indoors, doesn't matter. So the way these laws were so draconianly written, and they were ballot initiatives, so it relied on, that's why I said the people voted for something that they thought wouldn't affect them, and it did. So so that's why I'm hopeful that companies like yourself can be part of the message to these various states that they need to get rid of these stupid laws.
We have a page on our website where we do it state by state, what laws apply for trapping, various game, and so on. It is a complex web.
It is.
To put it mildly.
And it's not fair to manufacture. That you're a distributor, not a manufacturer, but it still affects you in the sense. So this is something we would love to get more support from businesses to realize, especially as people wanting to, perhaps use less toxicants in the environment. And that's not a bad thing, provided we get the kind of control that we need. And I want to encourage more invention and perhaps like your own. So hopefully I would love to find out if and maybe I should check your website, whether Washington and whether you've gotten a ruling in Washington or Massachusetts on these two traps, because those are two states that I'm more familiar with. Whether those traps are legal in those locations. So
our research was that they are legal against rats and mice, inside, always, everywhere. The bottom line is if they're true pests, that is damage to property, a threat, or threatening, like in the sense of like there's disease issues with all rodents really, but specifically rats and mice. And if they're inside your home or they're causing damage to livestock, then they are legitimate targets for control with basically no limits. But if they're fur bearing and they're not inside, that's where it gets really complicated, especially, for example, with squirrels. Squirrels can be horrible pests, getting into people's attics and causing all kinds of damage and fire and the feces and just the general destruction. Inside, they're fair game. That's terrible use in terminology. They're fair to kill, but if they're eating the bird seed in your bird feeder, they're not. Partially because the squirrel that you probably have in your yard eating your bird seed is indigenous, whereas the birds that you're feeding are probably invasive. So it changes from state to state.
So make sure
you're right about that. It's complex.
Make sure you check your laws, folks, and I would be definitely check them carefully. So because he's correct. I don't know of any state that protects rats and mice. But in terms of the issue is can you use this device in those two states like Massachusetts and Washington? Because what the law did was it banned devices. It didn't talk about the target of those devices. So that's the challenge. And so it gets quite nuanced. And, I think at times we do need a good lawsuit to probably overturn some of this stupid stuff if you can find the right judge. And that's hard to do in modern world. They're not I'm pretty negative on judges. So they seem to have trouble reading. But in any event, I digress. So let's get that back to your product. So one of the challenges I had with the product was I was frustrated as to why it didn't use a standard CO2 cartridge that was used in air rifles.
Sure.
Do you have any explanation as to why that is?
Well, a standard CO2 cartridge would require some sort of mechanism to force it through to the puncture, right? So if you think about your pellet gun,
Yeah.
that you put the cartridge in, there's at the back, there's a screw that you keep screwing in until it puts enough pressure to do it,
Okay.
right? So we would fundamentally change how it's designed. Another explanation might be they were not thinking about commercialization.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
So if you look at the trap, like this gizmo here, this piece of brass here, it's one of the most expensive raw materials in the whole thing.
Okay.
And when they invented the product, as I started talking about this at the beginning, it was kind of like a contest. So the Department of Conservation were looking for cheaper ways to control stoat populations, to keep them down. And what they were looking for was a trap that would be multi-kill, because they were using these huge boxes that were heavy and only killed one at a time. And they were like, one guy could carry two maybe into the bush and set them up, right? Mm-hmm. But they wanted it light. They wanted it multi-kill. It had to be humane. That was super important. But the criteria wasn't around the canister. Like it has to be commercially super accessible, right? So they chose this design then, and it hasn't changed since. You do get that question quite a bit.
Yeah,
but the cartridges
any chance that could change now that, if you've sold 50,000, I think, within the state, within the United States, I mean, clearly that maybe it's time for the second gen.
Well, they're working on lots of different things, and some of them I know about, and some of them I don't. Okay. But of the ones I know about, none of them are a new cartridge. Okay. Like the thing about the cartridge is I can understand the frustration. I have pellet gun cartridges too, right? And I'm like, it'd be great if it was just like that. And the other thing is that you see cartridges that are a lot cheaper. This is the same thread as on a bicycle inflator pump. So you can get a bicycle inflator pump cartridge off of Amazon, and it will fit in the device. The challenge is that these are a little different. They come with a little boot, which you no doubt you might have recalled, right? There's a little boot on the top here, and then when they're making these, they put a drop of oil on top of them, and they put the boot on. And so what happens is when this gets inserted in the fitting here, you've got a steel cartridge interfacing a brass item, and as you mentioned, that sometimes the seals leak. That problem is exacerbated when there's corrosion on the tip, which, even though the device is waterproof and operates outside, it operates for 6 months. And so you want to make sure that you're not going to get corrosion in there, because then that's going to lead to scarring on the seal. It's not, the end result is a leaking device. And you have to keep in mind that the cartridge is $5 retail. So, it's not cheap, but it's still very cheap on a per kill basis.
Yeah,
I think about 50 cents a kill.
In my mind, that this device could be used a whole lot more within our wildlife control industry, particularly in areas with customers who are really looking for some longer term maintenance of their property, but are really reticent to use toxicants. I do think that the price point can allow that, because the technician doesn't have to show up regularly to check the trap. If you're in the right type of that rural urban interface area, I think. I think that could definitely work. And so, and I think you're right. And I think that price point, but for some of our people, trappers historically, and I don't like to call wildlife control operators trappers, but they do a lot of trapping, but they tend to be, we tend to be cheap. To put it bluntly, right? So,
well, I mean, that's how it got started.
Well,
like, I'm hungry and I don't want to pay for food.
Right.
Where do I get it?
They're cheap, and so sometimes there's a little bit of reticence. But I think that if you're able to help people show, and I think you've done that here today, help them understand that cost benefit ratio, and especially when I'm all about giving customers options, I try to really encourage our audience: look, stop saying no to your client. Give them options, and then just charge appropriately for it. And so this would clearly be an option, not suitable everywhere, but I think your bait station idea would certainly make it more flexible and a safer option to even use more broadly, because you're reducing that risk of kids playing with it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's a great advance. What does the bait station cost?
Well, it comes as a kit, and we're introducing it at $250 a unit with all of the get up inside. That is the trap, the CO2, the lure, but it comes in a bigger setup. They come six too, so you get six of them in one. It's not we're not selling this commercially. We're only selling it to the trade. To PNPs and through distributors like Univar and Target and Wildlife Control Supplies, and all those guys are going to have it. So you'll be able to get it from them, and they come six at a time.
Six at a time, okay.
Yeah,
and so how do people get a hold of you, or should they be contacting their, I guess your sub-distributor? Do they contact you to purchase this product, or should they go to one of the other distributors that you mentioned?
Well, we're happy to talk to anybody. But a lot of PMPs find it just way more convenient to deal with, whoever they buy all their other stuff from, whether that's Univar or Target or Geotech. And the other thing is that you're not really going to get much of a better price from us if it's just a couple that you're getting. Right? So
can we list some of those distributors again? I think you mentioned Wildlife Control Supplies, Univar.
Yeah, Wildlife Control Supplies. We've been working with them for several years, almost. They were one of the first people we introduced it to, and it's been really good for them. And Target, Geotech, Univar, Gardex, they carry it in their catalog, or they can get it.
Gotcha. Okay. And then if push comes to shove, someone can always contact you, and you can either refer them to a distributor. I don't want you to get in trouble with your distributors if you neglected to mention somebody, but I would assume you have a list on your website, and they could always contact you and say, hey, is there another distributor?
The best way is to go to the website, because those distributors are changing. We've really only been pushing hard in the PMP distribution world for about 6 months now. So we're just constantly changing. And we're in retail now too, a couple hundred stores across the US, but that's growing rapidly. That's really starting to take off. And you can get it at a lot of ACE stores, especially out west. And the best way is to go to our website, because then you can find out where you can get it. And if you don't want to go to a store to get it or order it from your distributor, you can just buy it online from us, and we'll ship you one.
Well, let's give that website again for our audience.
It's automatictrap.com. And it's all there, all the information about the product. And there's some things I didn't mention that are pretty interesting too. I don't know if we have enough time.
We have a couple minutes, yep.
So there's this, because a lot of people at first, this doesn't make sense to them. What is this thing? This little device, it's called a counter, and it fits on the CO2 cartridge. And every time the device activates and kills, strikes, then it increments the counter one. Because what happens a lot, and you mentioned this, there's certain wildlife, in the urban rural interface type of situations, what you get is a ton of scavenging.
Right.
And you go to our website, you can see millions of videos of this. It's like rats taking the other rats and mice away, mice taking mice away, owls, raptors, foxes, raccoons, crows. I have a fence post right outside my office here where I have a dead mouse right now that I caught last night, and I'm training a crow. I'm trying to train a crow to come and get it every time, right? And it's kind of working, but anyway, so the counter is really good because it helps you keep track of scavenging. And we also have a stand unit, which I very stupidly don't have one here at my desk, but you can see it on the website. And I have it here. Yeah, this stand.
There you go.
It can mount in this plastic stand. And the advantage here is that the dead rats and mice collect up in this space here. I have to be careful, this one's live. I have a mouse in my office. And then you dump them out in the trash when you're done.
Nice.
Right? And then you're good to go. Plus, and this is the really good advantage, very easy to move around. So you can, because that's really key to success, is moving the trap as much as you can.
Yeah, location.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. It makes all the difference. So that's pretty much all the wares.
Well, let me give a couple of suggestions that I would love to see. I would love to see a more advanced, because you do send out some literature with the product. I would like to see that literature sort of expanded a little bit and sort of Americanized for some of the challenges that we have here in the U.S. that would talk about best practices. And I would really, encourage your company to talk to some of your, major purchasers and say, hey, what are you doing that's been successful? What have you found not successful? And try to, even if you made it as bullet points, to help people get the best use out of this interesting trap. And then secondly, I do hope you will come back to Pest Geek Podcast if there's new products coming down the line. You said they were working on some additional things in New Zealand. Some of you know, some you don't know. So we would love to get that announced out to our audience, because I do think it's a fascinating device.
Yeah, it captured my attention the instant I saw it, and I just jumped on a plane to New Zealand and said I have to be your distributor.
Wow.
And they're like, wow, we're not that much interested in distributors. They've doubled in size every year that I've been with them, and not on account of my stuff necessarily. Just the interest on this thing is worldwide. They're exploding. So they've done really, really well, and it's been a really exciting story.
It's a really neat design, and I would love to see what else they're coming up with down the road, because I think this notion of repeating traps eliminates one of the downsides of trapping, which is the requirement to come back and reset. And the fact that it has that brain strike is also a nice touch. It's never, to be that level of humane is amazing as a repeating trap. That's just remarkable. Yeah.
Great. Well, I promise you, I will let you know as soon as we have something new to
show. All right. Well, everyone, we want to thank you very much, Mr. Calder, for participating with our Pest Geek podcast. And so, everyone, thanks for listening. Do reach out to automatictrap.com. Check it out. Maybe it will fit within your particular business practice. It's always good to have things in the back pocket for that special job or special client that you think it might turn up. Sometimes, we're Pest Geek audience. I'm sure you a lot of tinkers out there. You might want to try it out in some jobs and play with it to see if it would fit within your business model. But we're certainly grateful for automatictrap.com and you, Mr. Calder, coming out on our show. And remember, everyone, this is Living the Wildlife with Stephen Vantassel, wildlife control consultant at gmail.com, wildlife control consultant at gmail.com. Definitely tell me how you think of the show, even criticisms as well. And remember, the show is about living the wildlife so that you're not the wildlife. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Take care.